Following up on my previous video that I did comparing the original 3DS XL with the new 3DS XL, I wanted to do a comparison video with the original 3DS with its XL version in this video, as 3DS are still very popular right now despite its discontinuation and also the shutting down of the eShop. Just like my previous video, I'll be doing a full comprehensive comparison between the two, and it's much more than just a screen size difference. As usual, I'll have chapter markers down below if you want to skip to a particular section, but let's start off with the original launch prices, colors, and designs. So at launch, the original 3DS actually started at $249 in the US, but later dropped down to $169 after a little bit of a poor reception due to the high price and lack of launch games. Later on, the 3DS XL was launched at $199, and both of them have very different color schemes and different limited editions, so if you're really into a particular design, you may just have to get that particular system. Now let's talk about what's the same. Unfortunately, the big thing is the screen resolution is exactly the same despite the XL having a 90% bigger screen, so that is 400 by 240 pixels for the top screen and 320 by 240 pixels for the bottom screen, and both still have the resistive touchscreen technology on the bottom screen. The cameras are as usual terrible. You can take technically 3D photos on these, but again it's VGA qualities both for the exterior camera as well as the interior camera. Doing a quick camera test here, it appears that the exterior photos on the XL is a little bit more color accurate for sure than the original, but they may also have to attribute to the fact that my original 3DS has the red color. Not too sure if that's the reason, but overall you can see just how grainy and noisy and lack of clarity are in these VGA photos. Mic quality and location is also roughly the same. You can see it's here at the bottom right corner. The LEDs for the power and charging are just right next to the mic hold there at the bottom as well for both systems. Same goes for the notification LED on the hinge, plus the fourth LED for the wireless, which also has its switch right next to it. On the front, bottom, left, and right corners on both of the systems, there are holes that you can loop a lanyard through. They also have the same internal processors, so any differences in speeds of opening, closing games, or turning on or turning off the systems would be more attributed to the SD card speeds themselves. And speaking of SD cards, they both support the full-size SD card size and charge up using the same charger, and navigating through the software interface is pretty much identical between the two. And they both play the exact same games, including backwards compatibility with DS games. Now let's briefly talk about what comes in the box. Now I did do separate unboxing videos on each of them. You can check out my channel for the in-depth of that. But basically, I did get two limited editions, so the box art is a little bit different than if you were to just get the system by themselves. So the XL, I have the limited edition A Link Between Worlds one with the game code downloadable. And the original one is the Super Mario 3D Land pre-installed limited edition. And the standard 3DS I have here is the one that was released at the $169 price. So it doesn't include stuff like the dock, which you can find in the original $249 original 3DS. So here's just a clip of that. But taking a look at the boxes themselves, it actually has the same finish as on the 3DS themselves. So the original one has a more glossy finish, so the box is actually a little bit glossy and shiny, versus the more matte finish on the XL, since the XL also has a matte finish. Content-wise, they both contain pretty much the same thing. They both include a charger with the foldable prong, AR cards, the thick packet of paperwork including their respective manuals, quick start guide in 3 different languages, Club Nintendo code back when Club Nintendo wasn't discontinued yet, and in the case of my limited edition Zelda one, it comes with the download code to download A Link Between Worlds. I did get both of these systems used, so unfortunately I didn't get the manuals with the 3D Mario set, but they do both come with the same kind of paperwork. And not to forget the actual systems themselves encased in this foam wrapper and this protective screen foam insert. Now let's talk about the differences in hardware. So dimension-wise, the XL is 6.14 inches wide versus the 5.28 inches in width on the original. The XL has a height of 3.66 inches versus the 2.91 inches on the original. Thickness-wise, they're very similar. The XL is just 0.87 inches versus the 0.83 inches on the standard size. And then when the systems are open to their usual open playing position, here are the dimensions for those. What this translates to in weight is 335.6 grams for the XL and 232.4 grams on the standard size. All to say that the standard size is definitely much more pocketable than the XL. In terms of exterior features, the standard has a 3-layer design paying homage to the 3D that was introduced on this system, and the original ones came with kind of a different 3-color tone, but because mine's is a special edition, the flame red version with the 3D Mario bundle, it actually has a single color throughout the whole design, but the 3DSs that didn't have a limited edition design all had that 3 different color tone. It was also a little bit more angular and tend to be top heavy, a little bit less ergonomic, and it was definitely super glossy, but the glossy didn't mean that it was a fingerprint magnet or a scratch magnet by any means. As you can see, my system is still quite scratch and fingerprint free versus the XL that had a matte finish, so it didn't really have the fingerprint issue at all, but it was generally a little bit more boring 2-tone color design. And because I have the special edition here, it looks, like this, but it also had a little bit more rounded corners, so it was a little bit more ergonomic in the hand. But I think design-wise, I do prefer the standard size one versus the kind of more conservative design choice with the XL. The finishes extend to the interior, with the standard size having that same glossy finish, and unfortunately also meaning reflective bezels on the top screen, and coupled with the very annoying constantly glowing 3D LED as long as the system is on, it definitely was a little bit harder on the eyes versus the XL with the matte finish, the matte bezels that didn't have that reflection when looking at the top screen. And speaking of the screens, this is the main selling feature of the XL, which is 90% larger, but unfortunately it is at the same pixel density, so the quality definitely looks worse on the XL on both the top and the bottom screens. The standard size has a 3.5-inch screen on the top, and the bottom is 3 inches. So just multiply that by 1.9 to get the dimensions for the XL. So while you are getting a bigger display, the display also looks noticeably worse. And then in terms of the buttons, because of the matte finish on the XL, the feedback on the circle pad just doesn't glide as smoothly as compared to the glossy finish on the standard size, and that's something I did notice right away when picking up the systems and playing. Not a huge deal as you do get used to it over time, but it is a difference. And I also do still kind of prefer the feedback. On the standard 3DS, the buttons just feel a little bit more clicky in terms of the playable buttons, the A, B, X, Y buttons, but in terms of the start, select, and home buttons, which are also still in the same locations right below the bottom screen, the XL breaks up those 3 functions into their own individual buttons, which is much better. And the trigger buttons, the L and R shoulder buttons, are also bigger on the XL. It takes up the full space, and they're also a little bit more responsive than the standard. So I think overall most people will appreciate the button feedback on the XL versus the standard, but personally I still prefer the circle pad and the ABXY buttons on the standard. If you wanted to change out your SD card, the location is very accessible, covered by the flaps on each respective systems, just on the right side for the XL and the left side for the standard size. By default, you do get a 4GB SD card versus a 2GB one on the standard size. In terms of the hinge, this is where I think the XL got a downgrade. Although on the XL it adds an additional hinge locking position similar to kind of like a laptop angle, it became super clicky and super annoying no matter how quietly or softly you try to open up your 3DS. Plus, with its bigger, bulkier size, the hinge also seems to be a little bit more loose compared to the original size 3DS. And although with either of the systems, the top hinge doesn't fully sit flush on the bottom, as you can see here, but the gap is definitely much more pronounced on the XL. But at least the raised bumps on the XL solves the issue of the bottom screen sometimes touching the top screen on the original size. As you can see, some of the grime buildup is outlined on the top screen from having touching the bottom screen. Talking about the speakers, they do have a different hole pattern between the two, and the 3DS XL does sound just a touch louder. But but in my opinion, both of them are just a little bit too quiet. But luckily, they do have a headphone jack that you can plug in to listen as well. But the location has shifted from the center, which was on the standard, to the left side on the XL, which I think was a poor choice, especially since the location could possibly interfere with your left palm. But other than that, the 3DS XL has some better design choices, especially in terms of, say, the volume slider, which is a little bit more pronounced versus the standard one, which was often a little bit difficult to feel with your fingers. The 3D slider on the XL now also has an additional notch just before you turn it completely off to let you know that you indeed turned off the 3D completely. Sometimes on the original standard size, I would think that I've turned off the 3D, but I still didn't quite get it all the way down. So with the new design, it definitely helps with that. And I certainly don't miss that glowing 3D LED that was found on the standard size. Another very welcome improvement is the stylus design and location now on the XL. Previously, it was this semi-metal telescoping stylus that was located in a terrible location on the back on the original size 3DS, and it was always a pain to have to pull it out that I usually just end up using my fingers, whereas the new one is back to the more familiar one-piece plastic stylus that is roughly the same length as the telescoping one when fully extended, and now located on the bottom right-hand side, which is really easy to pull out and put back. Now let's talk about the software and user experience. The screen resolution was already quite poor on the 3DS, and it's now even more obvious on the XL due to the same resolution. And keep in mind, the original 3DS already doesn't have an HD screen, so blowing that up on the bigger screen definitely doesn't help. Though to be fair, you don't really notice it anymore once you're immersed in the gameplay. But for the money, I would have expected them to at least keep the same pixel density on the XL. But hey, this is Nintendo, right? And to be honest, for playing backwards compatible DS games or virtual console games, the extra pixelation on the XL doesn't really hurt it too much. And the larger screen size is a little bit nicer, especially when playing DS games in their native size. I have a feeling that the resolution stayed the same, probably due to battery life. They needed to upsell the battery life on the XL, which does squeeze out 1 extra hour when playing 3D games, so 3 to 6 hours versus 3 to 5 hours on the standard size. And while the standard size is definitely more compact and pocketable, the XL is a little bit more ergonomic and definitely better for people with larger hands. So the nuance differences, the matte versus glossy finish, the slider and button feedbacks, the stylus location are just small preferential things. The big deciding factor is, of course, that screen and screen resolution and size. Whether that larger screen but poorer quality would really matter to you, and how compact you want your portable gaming system to be. So hopefully this video fully fleshed out all those nuanced differences for you to think about. Please smash that like button if you found this video helpful. Subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks for watching and happy gaming.